Clippers, the Jazz, and the Heat agreed to a trade. It sends Norm Powell to Miami, John Collins to the Clippers, and then Kevin Love, Kyle Anderson, and a 2027 Clippers second-round pick, all to Utah. Powell, remember, he was a borderline all-star. He averaged a career high just under 22 points a game last season, and this got some reaction from Kevin Love, who's become the king of social media, by the way.
Really
I was waiting for what he was going to say.
That's funny.
But this is how we weighed in. He said, I never thought I'd be a math problem. Welcome to the NBA. I guess welcome to the NBA indeed, Brian. What's your biggest takeaway when you're looking at this three-team deal?
Well, the reason Kevin said that, just so you know, is because he had to be included in this deal for salary purposes.
Right.
And the Heat are thrilled with what they got in this deal. They had been looking for a way to upgrade the talent on their roster and to be able to basically get John Collins from the Jazz and then flip him to the Clippers for Norm Powell. That is a big upgrade to their backcourt. Norm Powell is coming off of a career season. His steady improvement in the mid part of his career has been terrific. This is definitely the type of move that in an Eastern Conference that frankly is banged up and is devoid of talent. This kind of talent influx is huge for the Heat. And the Clippers make a big move here. They have added a lot to their front court over the last 2 weeks, signing Brook Lopez to be Ivica Zubac's backup, and now adding John Collins, a frontline power forward in the last year of his contract. You assume he's going to be motivated to have a big season.
Man, Wendy, repost, retweet, heavy on the what does this mean for the Miami Heat, y'all. Like, when I saw this going down, I'm like, huh? So I just go through this roster tentatively, right? Like, Norman Powell, I am in on that dude. I don't think last year was a fluke. Certainly it could be one of his career years, but I think he's in place to be able to duplicate that sort of productivity the next couple of seasons. But if you give me Adebayo, Powell, Hero, Wiggins, and Ware, Khalil Ware, I still think is a little bit of a gem in the league in terms of folks maybe not knowing how dynamic he is at 7 foot. But in the East, that is sort of open outside of the odds that you just mentioned for the New York Knicks. Like, that's not a bad starting lineup. You sprinkle in a little bit of Heat culture, if I may. And I don't know, you kind of got to see what can happen down in South Beach.
The backcourt is a little crowded. I'm curious if they're done making moves here. But since we're in Los Angeles and Clippers fans are curious, they desperately needed a power forward. That's something that last season you're kind of looking around and saying, all right, Kawhi cannot be taking on all of these minutes, right? Ramona, are they done? How are they feeling? If the East is wide open, the West is crowded.
Well, I don't think a team as smart as the Clippers front office would leave themselves bare in the starting shooting guard position if they didn't have a pretty good feeling that there might be a pretty good shooting guard becoming available via the buyout market fairly soon, and that's Bradley Beal. So I think you should regard the Clippers as one of the favorites for Bradley Beal if he is indeed bought out by the Phoenix Suns, and that comes to fruition as we've all been expecting for a while here. And if you're Brad Beal and you look up and you go, wow, I can play next to James Harden and stand out there and shoot threes, and I don't have to be the point guard anymore, I think that's a great fit for him. I know the Warriors have some interest in Beal. There's a lot of other teams that would have interest in him, but the Clippers have done a good job. It hurts them to lose Norman Powell.
Right.
I know it really hurt them to let go of him, but he was eligible for an extension. They have a well-chronicled discipline about not extending people beyond next year. They're going to have all this cap space. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but they are sticking to their plan, and so that's why they were trading Norman Powell and not extending.
Keeping that flexibility as well as being a team that wants to contend now. We saw how well, even though it was a loss, we saw how well they went up against some of the West's best last year. All right, we've hit on two of the teams of a three-team trade, but if we have Brian Windhorst and we have the Jazz involved, we've got to ask Brian, what's going on in Utah? We got to hit the third team here.
Well, what's going on in Utah is they're basically dumping all of their veterans. They bought out Jordan Clarkson. They traded Colin Sexton. Now moving out John Collins. Kevin Love, maybe don't look for housing yet. He probably may be able to get himself free. And that leaves, what about Lauri Markkanen? Now, Markkanen signed a massive contract extension before last season. And, from what I know in talking to people around him, his expectation was that he knew the Jazz were rebuilding, but he was expecting them to start powering up. What it looks like they're doing here is powering to be chasing A.J. Debinsa in the draft next year.
Right.
This team is very young. And so Markkanen didn't have his best year last year. I don't know if his value is as high as it was a year ago when there were teams like the Golden State Warriors knocking on the Jazz's door. But I got to wonder what the future of Markkanen, he's got a bunch of money on his contract, like around $190 million over the next 4 years. It would not be a clean and simple trade. But I got to wonder if the Jazz aren't going to be taking some calls, if not now, certainly into this season, because their actions indicate they're not building towards a team around Lauri Markkanen. They're building around their young players and potentially their future draft picks going into next year.
Right. Paolo Banchero agreed to a 5-year, $239 million max rookie contract extension. That number will be even higher if he makes All-NBA next season. So, Brian, what should we know about this deal?
Well, this is a huge move for the #1 overall pick from a couple years ago. A great move for the Magic, who lock in their core. If you look at Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs. The interesting thing about this, Malika, is that he got a player option in the 5th year. That had become almost extinct over the last 3 or 4 seasons. After last decade, we saw a number of players who got that player option. Guys like Donovan Mitchell, Paul George, Kyrie Irving, didn't stay with their teams.
That's certainly something to keep an eye on. Let's head to Indiana. Tyrese Haliburton recovering from the Achilles tear he suffered in the NBA Finals. But this is good to see. He made it to a Fever game on Saturday. Now, Pacers president Kevin Pritchard, he confirmed Tyrese will not play next season. So how is his team positioned, Monica, come his return in 2026?
Well, I know we're talking 2026, but I'm still not counting them completely out for 2025. But in 2026, I think you look at this roster, you look at a guy like Jarris Walker, you look at a guy like Thomas Bryant.
Yeah.
Obviously, if Tyrese Haliburton can come back and duplicate the success this past season, but here's the thing, this team is going to play with speed. With or without him, they will only be better at playing with if he is not available by 2026, but they'll be great once he returns.
Chris Paul is a free agent. He told Jamel Hill how much longer he intends to play.
At the most, a year. You know, I just finished my 20th season, which is a blessing in itself.
All right, so at the most a year. That means, do you believe this is it? Is that what he's saying?
I think this is it, and I think he will find a home. It's going to come, later than other free agents here. But last week on this show, I talked about I thought the Phoenix Suns would be the most likely landing place for him. I'm going to expand that or maybe amend it and say I think the Los Angeles Clippers make a lot of sense for him now. Now that they've traded Norman Powell, they need an extra reinforcement in the backcourt. And Bradley Beal's out there, but why not have both?
Bradley Beal and Chris Paul. All right, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on the Clippers. Elsewhere in Los Angeles, the Lakers added a much-needed big, Deandre Ayton. He cleared waivers, signed a 2-year deal. Ayton is expected to speak to reporters for the first time as a member of the Lakers this afternoon. But in a statement released by Lakers PR, Rob Pelinka, he said, quote, DeAndre's size, his mobility, athleticism will both allow paint scoring and paint protection. DeAndre's playoff experience as a starter on an NBA Finals team will also align with our ultimate Lakers championship aspirations. So again, we're going to be hearing from DeAndre Ayton a little bit later this afternoon. But Brian, how do you feel about his fit just looking at this current Lakers roster?
Well, the Lakers needed a center. They had $8 million to play with. That was their limitation. And they get a guy in his prime who has put up terrific numbers, who is going to be highly motivated. The contract he signed has an out after this year, which means that we're going to see potentially a DeAndre Ayton that we haven't seen in a while. He signed that contract with the Suns. He was salty from the moment that he signed it because he had to go get an offer sheet from the Pacers, and he just wasn't the same player over the last few years. All you can ask for from the Lakers in the situation they were in was to get a motivated, high-production player at that price. They did. Is he a perfect player? Of course not. He wouldn't have been bought out if he was a perfect player. But the Lakers are in a situation of need. DeAndre Ayton is in a situation of need. We'll have to see how they work together.
It feels like Luka Doncic's opinion here, Ramona, may be the most important, particularly because we have seen Luka thrive when he has a rim-running big. I'm not sure I necessarily describe DeAndre Ayton that way. However, he was a part of maybe the most famous alley-oop of the last couple of years, the Valley-oop, right?
We were there, yeah.
And so Luka is looking for a partner, a tandem. Can DeAndre Ayton be that? I guess he has to be.
He's right now he is.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the long-term partnership, but he has the opportunity. And obviously, Luka was consulted on this. They have the same representation in Bill Duffy's agency and Neiman Namakian. And there's a synergy there, right? They checked in with Luka. Obviously, he was for this move. And so that's all you need to know here. Like, if Luka's on board, then that's what they got. And I don't know if this is going to be the long-term fit for the Lakers, but this is a make-good contract. And DeAndre Ayton had a lot of success. He was a starting center on that Phoenix Suns team that made the finals. And that was when he had Chris Paul in his ear, when he had Devin Booker in his other ear, and he was in a very structured environment with Monty Williams as the head coach. Well, Luka's on one ear. LeBron's on the other ear. JJ Redick will be in his ear. I think this is a good environment for him to succeed and on that make-good kind of contract.
I think you're right in all the
You don't sound as convinced.
Well, we have talked ad nauseum, and I often have disagreed with the way that Luka has been discussed in terms of needing to turn over the leaf as far as his conditioning and taking it to the next level. DeAndre Ayton's got to be able to respond here. But here's what I think is beautiful about this for him. He doesn't even necessarily have to be the same version of himself that he was in Phoenix, right? Luka threw 50 lobs last year. That's 7th in the league in terms of total. That's easy.
Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton is a bona fide NBA player. He can catch the ball, he can finish at the rim, right? He doesn't even necessarily have to go back or turn the hands of time back in the other way. Now, to your point, it is a tremendous opportunity, Ramona, because if he does, and this is a short-term contract, he's going to look like a prize to the rest of the league.
He's got to see it as an opportunity, though.
Mm-hmm.
Wanna try to boast at what I look like. Think I'm gonna try to wear, I pull up all brains. Jimmy with the heat, I'm on fire. It's NBA, I'm a